This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. Back on February 20th, I had stated in this video that I believe that the as ever whatever was a red herring, meaning that it was not a serious business and it was being used for something. A distraction to promote our new show. This was a time when USAID blew up. Ben Archwell was getting scrutinized over the $250,000 that was donated to Ashley Biden's charity that was not reported. Meghan's as ever, whatever, that rebranded joke from the moronic American Riviera Orchard is a blatant orchestrated flop. Now, for the many of you who are regulars on this channel, this should be no surprise to anyone that Meghan may never restock her sellout jam because she just wants to take a step back. I told everyone that this was not serious. This was all part of the marketing PR plan to rebrand Meghan as this lifestyle guru that was going to compete with Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop. All to get us to forget about the past 4 years and Meghan's meddling and divisiveness, as well as being an agent of chaos for the deep state. For those that still have trouble believing this and don't think that Meghan is smart enough or whatever, there is evidence that supports this. Let me show you. In the federal funding and contract database, there is an entry for a grant of $15,900 that was granted to a miscellaneous foreign awardee, meaning a person, from the U.S. Embassy in London, aka the Department of State, and the Bureau of European and Eurasian Affairs, also the Department of State. Now, it says in the description, the United States, were funding a workshop at this One Young World event that Meghan and Harry just so happened to be there as well in 2022. Now, when you look through the database, there are no other entries or any type of information given showing that this is the reason why we're supporting this European organization and this is how it benefits U.S. foreign interests. No, nothing of the sort. Nothing before this event, and there has been nothing after this event. Also, if we did fund a workshop, it would have been mentioned somewhere in the 2022 report that they put out summarizing this summit. As you can see here, there is no thank you to our hosts who were funding these workshops. Also, there was no other notable American that was there that could fill in the shoes of being considered representing and conducting furthering foreign affairs. I hate to say it, but Meghan was acting in that capacity when she went there. Through the process of elimination, this award could have only have gone to one American, and that would be Meghan Markle. Now, this is not the only instance that I have seen that ties the U.S. government back to Harry and Meghan. And it all ties back to this handy-dandy graphic that I have put together. We're going to focus a little bit in this quadrant with all the government agencies that Harry and Meghan have been involved with. As you can see there, we have the Department of Defense, the Department of State, CISA, DHS, NATO, and then let's not forget Brigade 77 in the UK. For the past 7 years, this asshole, Prince Harry, has been exploiting and using veterans, especially American veterans, as his own personal shield to improve his brand. While behind the scenes, this guy has been doing everything he possibly can to undermine American civil liberties and take away the freedoms, the very same freedoms that these veterans had fought for to protect. Now, I'm going to call it out and say that Harry's visa needs to be revoked ASAP. I said this back in 2021, that he needed to get the F out of here because what he was doing, clearly you all see, is violation of our rights. But here's the thing. Harry is not solely responsible for this censorship mess that we're in. I'm going to put the blame on the United States. We are responsible for the censorship that's going on in Europe and in the UK because we funded it. When I look through the federal contracting database and I see all the projects, all the universities and the programs that were being funded, billions of dollars, all towards protecting democracy in reducing any type of online radicalization. And when you look at the various projects that they were throwing money out at, one for studying and analyzing social behavior, influencing behavior, covert operations. I'm telling you this right now, the more that I see what our government has done and understanding the whole censorship complex and what we've gone through the past 4 years with the censorship, the attacks, the lies that Meghan and Harry were telling, it all makes total sense as to what they were doing. And this was done all under the guise of public safety to prevent radicalism. And as I've said before, if you've been following me, particularly in the psychological warfare series that I've done, that all of this was being done to prevent the rise in populism. But in the way that they were spinning it, it was all to keep us safe. And in 2019, when the Christchurch massacre happened in New Zealand, the globalists, or the Western nations like New Zealand, France, Australia, Canada, and the UK and EU all took it upon themselves to say, we are going to give it this Christchurch call, a call to action to clamp down on social media to prevent the rise of terrorism and radicalism. But if you go back to that time in 2019, the hard focus was on white males and white supremacy. And the whole reason why, and I believe that this was part of the psychosis into believing that Donald Trump was some dictator, was because Donald Trump was in office and we had an election coming up in 2020 and these globalists could not chance having him get back into office again because their Agenda 2030 had a big wrench in it because Donald Trump was undoing everything. Interestingly enough, after the Christchurch massacre happened, Harry and Meghan show up, surprise, surprise, at the New Zealand house to pay respects in 2019. Meghan had already been on her maternity leave, but was able to get herself together to go and stoop down to lay those flowers down. Now, this wasn't a scheduled visit, and some reports say that the Queen had asked Meghan and Harry to go and do this on behalf of the royal family. Now, you could believe the newspaper articles, or you could believe that potentially this was part of the plan, part of the optics. Because literally like a month and a half later, Jacinda Ardern and Macron get up and launch this Christchurch call to action. Now, the Christchurch call to action is a non-binding international pledge that is still very much alive and well. That was initiated by Jacinda Ardern and Macron following the Christchurch mosque shootings on March 15, 2019, where 51 people were killed and the attack was live-streamed on social media. Announced on May 15, 2019 in Paris, the initiative aimed to eliminate terrorist and violent extremist content online by fostering collaboration between governments and tech companies. It includes commitments from governments to enforce laws against such content, from tech companies to improve content moderation, and joint efforts to share data and develop tools to prevent the spread of extremist material. And you know what they say, never let a tragedy go to waste. And this was the event that really was the catalyst towards all these governments now pushing for circumventing people's privacy rights, as well as silencing and censoring any kind of dissent that opposed or challenged the globalist narratives. And that's exactly what we saw. In 2019, the Trump administration declined to join this Christchurch call, citing concerns that it could conflict with U.S. First Amendment protections for free speech, which he was right. The White House stated it supported the initiative's overall goals, but was not currently in a position to join the endorsement due to these constitutional concerns. And how convenient that the shooter actually wrote a manifesto and praised Trump as a symbol of renewed white identity. Now, if we are to go back and look at where this guy is now and what actually happened, because I guarantee you we were not told the full story or have the full picture, because there was a narrative being pushed. And this was all part of the plan in gearing up to control the information for the 2020 election. Because that's exactly what had happened. And guess what happened in 2021 when Biden was pushed into office? He goes and he joins this Christchurch call to action, framing it now as a priority to counter the use of the internet by terrorists and violent extremists for radicalization and recruitment. Now putting this under with the corrupt and should be tried for treason Alejandro Mayorkas from the Department of Homeland Security in their cyber division. Now you understand how this all connects. In that cyber division, CISA, was where Chris Krebs had worked. And for those that don't remember who Chris Krebs is, he was one of the co-chairs on the Aspen Commission on Information Disorder with Prince Harry. He also was a part of CTEL, which is the Cyber Threat Intelligence League, along with Sarah Jane Turp, who was from the UK, and had been in connection with Christopher Boozy and supporting his bot Sentinel from the very beginning in August of 2018. This tragedy was the catalyst and excuse for DHS now to circumvent Fourth Amendment rights, which is your right to privacy, and also violate First Amendment rights, which is freedom of speech. And that's exactly what we saw. They weren't targeting extremists. They were targeting conservatives. They were targeting people that went to church. They were targeting anyone who didn't fall in line with the agenda that was being pushed. And we saw this heavily, not only during the election, but we also saw it with Meghan in this community. If we dared talk about that fake moon bump that she wore, in my opinion. And then, we saw this to the most extreme with COVID and people who wanted to speak out about their experiences and seeing if there were other people who were having those experiences. And you couldn't have those conversations. And you see how many people that got hurt. I truly think that it was a blessing that Elon Musk bought over Twitter, because had it not been for him, it would have never been exposed of how the government in the United States, as well as other governments, had been in collusion behind the scenes to suppress and silence its citizens. Access to information and free speech were the biggest threats for these globalists in order to achieve this totalitarianism that they were going for. And Harry and Meghan were very much involved and a part of it. Whatever this is definitely a psyops. And while many see these two as big failures, no, hardly the case. And I'll explain why in a second. Now, before I do, I ask you to kindly hit that like button and help the kid out. As you know, I work very hard on these videos and I go deep when I research, and I just want people to see it so people can be aware as to what has been going on. I really do appreciate everybody's support, so thank you. So I've spent the last couple days in deep thought, as well as doing a lot of reading and digging into this federal contract database, looking at all the various contracts and projects and things that we spend money on, and noticing that a lot of the projects that they had brought up really do feel like they were carried out on us in this experience, to a point where I'm actually thinking that this whole thing that we have been going through with these two assholes has been one giant experiment. Remember, nobody knew who this zealous actress was. She just came out of nowhere once she started dating Harry in 2016. And what we've noticed, and I've done a video on this in the past, is that Meghan's persona suddenly shifted into being this humanitarian blogger and lifestyle guru, whatever it is that she was trying to do, in getting ready to meet Prince Harry. And this all began around 2014. Prior to 2014, there really wasn't that big of a digital footprint of Meghan. I mean, sure, there were little video clips of her here and there and her being on Suits, but as far as a social media presence, many didn't really know what Meghan was about because it simply wasn't there. But then she had the TIG, and I am guessing that she put this TIG up not because she was interested in being this lifestyle person or interested in carrying it forward and being this next Gwyneth Paltrow. This was all part of the front, just like this as ever whatever. The TIG is where we learned about her alleged father and the things that she used to do with him as a little girl, and just a small little window into who Meghan is supposed to be. At the same time in 2014 is when her Wikipedia page got cleaned up to her being this feminist and women's advocate. And now all of a sudden she's this humanitarian, out of nowhere. All of a sudden she wants to be kind and compassionate, painting this construct, getting ready to do what she was going to do. None of what we saw with Meghan and Harry has been natural or normal. It's all been a lie. And you can see now, based off of how she used the media and how it was put out there, that after a while, all the lies and conflicting stories, and now you're seeing Meghan failing on all cylinders. You can't be that big of a failure when you have all these resources at your fingertips and a multimillionaire. It's not like she's doing all this stuff alone on her own. There is a strategic plan behind it. We're talking millions being thrown away here. I was doing the math today on the amount of PR that they put out into the media, saturating it. And this has been going on for now 8 years. I think Meghan started doing this in 2016 and she hasn't stopped since. When you calculate how much that potentially costs, there's no way that they are taking their own money to just throw it away and waste like this. There's no way. Up until 2023, when Sunshine Sachs was doing PR for Harry and Meghan, it was rumored it estimated to cost around like $3 million a year. I think that it's more based off of the various media and publications that they go to put stories out there, as well as the amount of crisis management. And being that they're one of the best, I would think that they charge them a premium rate. So I would say more like 4 or 5 million per year. And if this was going on since 2019 to 2023, we're looking at maybe 12 million, 15 million that they had to shell out for this shit that they have been doing. Remember, Ken Sunshine is best friends with Hillary Clinton and a lot of the Democrats. So during that time, a lot of the things that Meghan and Harry were doing were indeed politically motivated. Now I'm going to go ahead and ask you to put your tinfoil hats on and humor me, because what I'm about to say is just pure speculation. It's just me thinking out loud, hypothesizing, and trying to make sense of this whole circus that we have witnessed over the past 7 years with these two clowns. I am of the belief that this woman is some kind of asset for whether it be the US, the UK, or Mossad, one of the three, based off of the amount of lies that Samantha Markle, Thomas Markle Jr., Thomas Markle Sr., and Meghan Markle all have told. Then anything that they tell us should be scrutinized. And I do think that there is a possibility that the Markles might not even be related to Meghan. And I'm allowed to believe that, as well as not trust what they have to say based off of the amount of lies and contradictions that they have told over the course of 7 years that has been well documented on this channel. And we're not talking about newspaper articles quoting and misquoting. This is their own words coming out of their own mouths being put back to them. So, at this point, whatever they say, if they are supposed to be Meghan's family, I'm going to challenge that and say, oh, really? I'm skeptical of that. Just because you tell me that the sky is green, I have to believe that? No. Now, remember, these people are public figures and they put this stuff out there into the public domain, of which, as an American, I have the right to criticize, to give my opinion under the First Amendment. And I don't care if they don't like that I don't believe what they have to say. I really don't. I think we're more than past the point of having to be reasonable and giving the benefit of the doubt. Like I've said before, I am of the belief that this whole entire thing is a psyops. And when we look at all the dynamics and the players that are involved, it just makes more sense. And I'm going to walk you through the various components, as I really did think through this deeply on the various players and their roles and what was to be accomplished. So let's now dive into that. Beginning with this stupid woman that we're told to call Meghan Markle. Let's say Meghan was recruited by one of those intelligence agencies like the CIA. From what I understand, the CIA, when they recruit, they look for certain qualities. Meghan being a narcissist and sociopath or psychopath, they literally struck gold with this woman. Now, if I had to guess, I would think that Meghan was recruited around 2008, 2010, because during that time, that's when the CIA, according to Andrew Bustamante, former CIA, had said that the CIA was trying to diversify and get more ethnic-looking people because of everything that happened with 9/11. We were in this post-9/11 world, and Meghan sure looks very ethnic in the sense of not black, but definitely Filipino or even Mexican. Definitely not black, but I could see the appeal there. Now, given the fact that Meghan has lied on just about everything so far, I don't think we should really believe her now on how she got the role of Suits. Do I believe that she walked in there and the producer or director, whoever it was, that said, "You're enough"? No, I think that story was made up. I think the Chia found a spot and put her there. Because with USA Networks, the Chia works very close with certain series that they had going on, like Covert Affairs. The Chia is very involved in some of these in Hollywood. So is it possible that the Chia placed her in Suits? Yeah, very possible. So if we are to go with this timeline, that in like 2008, 2009, she was recruited by the Chia, because when you think about it, she quit Deal or No Deal in 2007, and there was this little gap of time. Could it be during that gap she was being psychologically, I want to say, groomed for the role? Whether it be, if you believe in MK Ultra, or other psychological tactics that the Chia uses to brainwash and to sort of reprogram people, then I would think that possibly that happened within that window, because then in 2011, she was on Suits. Now, I think in 2011, that's when we saw William and Catherine come into their own, because that was the year that they got married. Could it be that the Chia saw Meghan as this perfect tool to infiltrate one of the world's most visible institutions, the British monarchy? Yeah, that's possible. And when you think about it, Meghan's mission really was twofold in what she did. One, destabilize the monarchy as a symbol of traditional Western power. And two, create a public spectacle to test and refine mechanisms for controlling narratives and curbing free speech. Those were the two things that I see Meghan really accomplishing, in the sense, like, yes, she did destabilize the monarchy for a split second. She did. She rocked them for a good couple of years between 2021 and 2023, when they were able to silence dissenting voices. With Meghan's Marxist leanings that were cultivated through whatever her education was, and the demon rats that she surrounded herself with, were definitely aligned with the deep state and their deeper goal, which we are now seeing play out in Europe, is to erode national sovereignty and cultural cohesion in favor of a globalized, centralized system of governance. I mean, by now, there should be no one thinking that this one world government is a conspiracy theory. Whenever you hear the term global citizen, run the other way. Meghan's alleged casted family, Thomas, Samantha, and others, were witting accomplices from the very beginning, and there's evidence of that. Not merely dysfunctional relatives. Like, when you think back at all the chaos, every time that they were involved, each was assigned a role to amplify that chaos. Their public outbursts and contradictory stories engineered to flood the media with nothing but noise, keeping people like you and I confused and unable to discern truth from fiction. So when we look back at the period from 2018 to 2025, it's marked by controlled disruption, from Meghan's engagement to marriage to eventual departure from royal duties. Each one of those milestones held chaos within it. I mean, when you think about it, even before the engagement, from the very beginning when it was announced to the world that Meghan was dating Prince Harry, in less than 24 hours, Samantha is doing an interview with The Sun, kicking off the feud by calling Meghan Princess Bushy. And fast forward, when they got engaged, all of a sudden now there's these photos of Thomas Markle getting chased and papped by Coleman Rayner in 2017, way before Samantha said that, "Oh, we need to improve your brand. You should do the photo shoot, Dad," with Coleman Rayner. Come on. And then we had, right before the wedding, we had the drama of Thomas Markle having the heart attack. Or 2 heart attacks, excuse me. I mean, at first it was 1, now it's 2. The whole thing was a setup. And if you don't see that Thomas Markle sitting here with Caroline Graham giving interviews, while this is the same Caroline Graham who was responsible for the article in the first place that so-called ruined his life with Meghan. And then, as a result of the chaos that was brought on as a result of staging this whole entire sham, Thomas Markle suddenly has this heart attack, and then it became 2 heart attacks. And then he felt like he needed to prove to the world that he had these heart attacks by sharing his medical statement with the Daily Mail. This in itself was a mini disinformation campaign because if anybody had challenged the narratives that were being spun because they were all inconsistent and contradictory across the board by the various media outlets that were reporting on what really happened to Thomas Markle, and Thomas Markle actually talking to someone from TMZ who spilled the beans on what was really going on, none of it added up. And what we saw at the time and still see up to this day, if you dare challenge the narrative that Thomas Markle had this heart attack based off of all the inconsistencies, they made you feel like you were the dumb one. You were the crazy one. And shame on you for picking on an old, sick man who doesn't have that much time left. Well, they've been saying that this man doesn't have much time left for like the past 7 years. Oh, he's poorly. He's not doing well. I mean, it's like dangle that carrot every single interview that the Markles do. Oh, I don't know how much time I have left. The Markle men don't make it past 80. So nobody is going to dare question this, even though deep down you know that there's something not right with it. My assumption is that they banked on the international crowd not knowing what a U.S. medical bill looks like. But for the Americans, you're looking at this and you're saying, well, where's the hospital name? Where is like the patient ID? Where are certain things that are standard on a bill per law for legal purposes? Now, I know that there are a few of you right now out there sitting there doing a Greta Thunberg going, how dare you? How dare you pick on a sick and elderly man? I know you're out there. You do it every single time I bring up this topic. You need to understand I don't care because I don't like liars. And what's happening here is that they're all lying to you. If the inconsistencies of the Markle story doesn't get to you, then maybe this analysis by a tool that is way smarter than myself and any of you out there to do an analysis on the actual bill. Did you know ChatGPT has the capability of doing this? Well, here you go. And the results come back saying, in conclusion, when asked, give me just a conclusion, is this a real medical bill? Conclusion, this does not appear to be a real medical bill. It lacks essential elements such as a hospital name, address, billing codes, insurance information, and standard formatting found on authentic U.S. hospital invoices. It looks more like a simplified or staged document. Now, I know there are going to be some of you who are going to hang on the part where it says it may be a simplified version of a hospital bill. So then I continued on and asked the question, are you aware of simplified medical statements in the US like this? What hospital would this be from? Especially since it was stated in the Daily Mail article that this was from a hospital in California. The response is as this. There are simplified patient summaries or patient-friendly billing statements used in the U.S., especially after a patient is discharged. These are often called patient account summaries, estimated bills, balance due notices. However, even these simplified versions always include at least the following: hospital name or healthcare network, Cedars-Sinai, Kaiser Permanente, UCLA Health, patient account number, customer service contact info, date of service, billing code, sometimes hidden but present in backend. So the question is probed again. So is this kind of format used in real U.S. hospitals? No hospital in the U.S. issues a statement this vague. Even the simplest bills still include branding and identifiers for legal and insurance reasons. This document resembles a mock-up or media presentation aid, not a legitimate bill or even a standard summary of charges. What hospital might this be from? It says the image offers no hospital identifier, and the font and formatting do not match known templates from major California hospitals: Cedars-Sinai, Sharp, UCLA, Scripps, etc. The total charges are high, suggesting a private hospital, but none of them issue such generic unbranded documents. Conclusion: no known U.S. hospital, especially in California, issues billing documents this minimal or anonymous. If it's based on a real bill, this is likely a reformatted or heavily edited version, not an official statement. So, what I can say with confidence based off of the information that is being pulled is that this was fake. Now, I don't want people to think that ChatGPT is the end all be all. It's not always correct. That's why it's recommended you should double check the information that they are giving to validate on what it's saying is true. And in this case, it is, because this is standard in the United States on how these bills are supposed to look. So here's an example of what Cedars-Sinai would look like in their summary bill. So now you can see why this doesn't look legitimate. But getting back to what I was saying is that there's always some type of drama that has been created around certain milestones for Harry and Meghan. And then, they exited. I mean, the amount of disruption and chaos, it was a lot, but I think like normal people would have thought, okay, Meghan and Harry would go live happily ever after and this would die down. But no, nothing's died down. It's been this one long haze of these people constantly mind effing all of us with these lies and confusion. This couple knew from the very beginning that they would be leaving. They even slipped and said it in the Oprah interview as well as the Netflix mockumentary. So it wasn't like it was a surprise. Whatever conversations that they were having with the family, I guarantee is not what we've been told. So if we think about the Chia, which is actually the deep state, their strategy, not only with Meghan and Harry, but I think with other things like the jab and the whole bioweapon that was unleashed onto us, their strategy with Meghan was to weaponize Meghan's presence within the monarchy to expose its vulnerabilities, to sow division and create a global media frenzy. The key events, we know the Oprah interview, the Netflix mockumentary, the memoir Spare, all were scripted milestones, each designed to inflame public opinion and polarize discourse. Meghan even talks about that in the Oprah interview, saying that we have this concept of polarity. They know what they're doing here. Meghan's behavior, let's say she is this agent of chaos. Meghan's actions, from alleging racism within the royal family to her curated victimhood narrative, were deliberate provocations. Her interviews and public statements were crafted to exploit cultural fault lines, in my opinion, particularly around race and privilege. Then you have this with the 5 friends and leaking up the letter, as well as this court case, all orchestrated, all to confuse the masses between the various narratives that were thrown in there to become one complete mess. And what resulted of it? Meghan winning $1. Now, you sit back and think about what's going on with the judges here in the United States and how corrupt the system is. Have we not questioned the same thing going on in the UK with its 2-tiered system? Okay. The United States and the UK have been in partnership leading the charge on this censorship and monitoring media and information control. And it's my belief that behind the scenes have been the governments backing and supporting this so-called social experiment that we've all been on. And this is why Meghan was allowed to get away with so much. Her job was to be this agent of chaos, to inflame the tensions. By presenting herself now as this so-called progressive outsider challenging an outdated institution, she appealed to the socialist and Marxist audiences while alienating traditionalists, creating a perfect storm of division. Her apparent inconsistencies that we see here, claiming privacy while seeking publicity, decrying royal privilege while leveraging it, were intentional, folks, designed to keep the public chasing contradictions and unable to focus on the bigger picture, which we saw over the past 4 years. We got screwed. When we look at the Markle family, the public feuds were a scripted sideshow. Thomas Markle's staged paparazzi photos and Samantha's inflammatory interviews were choreographed to portray Meghan as both a victim and a lightning rod for controversy. This kept tabloids and social media platforms constantly flooded with conflicting narratives, training the public to accept confusion as the norm. But their true purpose was to distract from the deeper objectives of the deep state. That's my opinion. And when we look at how both the Markles and Meghan weaponized race. The race narrative, particularly the claim that a senior royal questioned the skin color of Meghan and Harry's child, was a calculated move. And I think we all know that. It tapped into the global sensitivities at that time around systemic racism. I mean, look at the George Floyd protests, polarizing audiences and forcing the monarchy into this defensive posture. They really didn't know how to handle this. And what they did by framing the royal family as out of touch, Meghan's, whoever the handlers are behind her, aimed to erode its legitimacy and, by extension, the cultural stability of the United Kingdom. That's what I see out of all of this. This was a test case for using identity politics as a weapon to destabilize institutions, paving the way for broader societal control. There's a reason for this managed decline, and we see it happening across the UK, the EU, Australia, and Canada. Thank goodness the United States has woken up and have been trying our best to put our brakes on this wealth redistribution, because that's what was happening the past 4 years. And I think this is a great explanation of what was happening, where it says a well-funded cabal of powerful people ranging across industries and ideologies working together behind the scenes to influence perceptions, change rules and laws, steer media coverage, and control the flow of information. They were not rigging the election. They were fortifying it. Now, I believe the purpose of Harry and Meghan, when we look at this from a geopolitical perspective, the agenda really for Harry and Meghan was always censorship and information control, as well as eroding privacy. This chaos that we saw surrounding Meghan and Harry, in my opinion, was a proving ground for a larger geopolitical strategy, which was winning the information war and justifying censorship. Look how we were treated during the pandemic. By flooding media with divisive narratives, the operation created a pretext for governments and tech giants to intervene under the guise of combating misinformation. You know how mis and disinformation is a humanitarian crisis, according to Harry. Meghan's public campaigns against online hate and toxicity were a front for advocating speech controls, aligning with globalist efforts to regulate digital platforms. And the deep state, aka the Shia, working with transatlantic partners like the UK and New Zealand and Australia and Canada, used the saga to normalize surveillance and censorship, framing free speech as a threat to social harmony. Now, I go back and forth trying to figure out, what is Prince Harry's role in all of this? Did he know from the very beginning? I don't think he did know. I think initially he was not aware of what Meghan's ulterior motives were and her agenda. And I think that he was too drawn in by her charisma or whatever else that she gave him. And I think she played on his vulnerabilities, and he enjoyed the company of resenting the royal institution. You know how they say misery loves company? And I think that his own grievances, feeling sidelined as the so-called spare and mourning his mother's death and distrusting the media, made him a willing participant in all this chaos. Meghan preyed on him, or the handlers of Meghan knew how to exploit his emotional vulnerabilities, positioning Meghan as literally his ally against the system he felt so betrayed by. Now, I do think that Meghan literally was on her best behavior up until she signed that wedding certificate and then switched off like a light. And I think by 2020, Harry started to see that Meghan had an ulterior motive or an agenda, but he was still so smitten by her that he was going along with whatever she wanted. And I think his loyalty to her made it that much more complicit, and he couldn't get out of it. Harry's public statements about combating misinformation and protecting democracy, I think initially were genuine, but definitely we are now seeing that he was misguided. Like, how stupid is this man? Like, your wife can't tell you how important the Constitution is, and you go off and insult the First Amendment? You wonder why America hates you so much? But I think we're all now coming to terms and understanding that the reality is Harry really always was about advancing a globalist agenda to suppress dissent and centralize control over information, and was on board with this whole plan, including efforts to counter populist movements like Trump's, as well as others. We're seeing what's happening in Romania, we see what's happening in France with Marie Le Pen, and we see what's happening in Germany. And if you notice, it's all happening at the same time. And that's because Western world is not happy with what these globalists have been doing all at the same time. It's not a coincidence that every Western country has been opening their borders. It's not a coincidence that all these stupid climate change policies that are being implemented now are taking a toll on the regular people. It's not a coincidence that over the past 4 years, all these Western countries who claim that they are champions of democracy want to censor and silence dissenting voices, thus tightening restrictions by implementing laws. I don't think that's a coincidence that all these countries are doing this all at the same time. Obviously, this is a coordinated effort to manage this decline and consolidate power towards this one world government. And speaking of one world government, we do know that the royals are globalists and are in favor of Agenda 2030 and these UN SDG goals. So as I've been thinking this through, the one question kept popping up in my mind as, did the royal family know they had been infiltrated? And I would say, of course they did. You would be naive to think the royals knew nothing about who this snake was coming into their close circle. Common sense would tell you that anyone that gets close to the family goes through a thorough background check. And, not for nothing, the Queen had access to the world's best intelligence, such as Scotland Yard and MI6. And being a part of Five Eyes, you don't think they know someone over in the United States in the intelligence community? Come on. There's a reason why the royal family never spoke of or included the alleged Markle family. It's not because they respected Meghan's wishes, it's because they knew who they really were. At bare minimum, why didn't anyone from the royal family have one of their royal aides send Thomas Sr. a get well card? Because after all, he did miss the biggest day in his alleged daughter's life. I think understanding that etiquette is very important to the royal family, and knowing that they respond to every letter that gets sent to them, even if it's through the royal aides, then etiquette would have told them to go ahead and send Thomas Markle a get well card at bare minimum. That is just common courtesy. But I believe the reason why they didn't do anything is not because they're rude and heartless people. It's because the Markle story just didn't add up, and they know something that we don't. Now, in my opinion, the late Queen's apparent inaction was not passivity, but pragmatism. The monarchy, very much aware of Meghan's disruptive potential, chose containment over confrontation. Now, I do believe that the Queen was given intelligence, and there was this element of suspecting foreign influence, but perhaps maybe they didn't have sufficient concrete evidence to act decisively in this instance, and instead, the royal family, what we saw, adopted this strategy of minimal engagement. The royal family's silence makes total sense. They're protecting the institution, avoiding a diplomatic mess, and betting on Harry and Meghan imploding on their own, which is what's happening. And I think we all see that if the royals chose to respond back to Harry and Meghan's antics, whether it was responding to the Oprah interview and the allegations of racism or spare, what it actually does is amplify this circus. And that's what Meghan and whoever her backers wanted. They wanted the royals to react so they could take it and twist it, further eroding or damaging the reputation of the institution. So it was best that they stayed silent because it didn't give anything for them to work with. Now, I would have to agree with many of you that Harry and Meghan are not the architects running this operation. Definitely not. When it comes to tearing down the institution and Meghan's grudge against the royal family, I think that is predominantly Harry and Meghan. But when we look at the disinformation campaigns, as well as their work that they have been doing with various organizations and the people that they have surrounded themselves with, namely high-ranking Democrat officials, you then see the other side to it, the government connection to it. So now when you think about this whole operation, they really have a shadow consortium behind them with a blend of the intelligence community, Silicon Valley social engineers, the universities, and ideological billionaires, think Reid Hoffman, and Satan himself, George Soros, all connected through this global NGO influence with the aim of shaping Western culture by deconstructing old power, elevating new authority structures based on technocracy, surveillance, and moral absolutism. So now when we look back and we reflect on Harry and Meghan, I think for the most part, superficially, we all say that they are colossal failures. But are they really failures? Or was this what was always intended to happen? Because when you look at this from a strategic perspective, speech laws now have tightened in the UK and EU. And you might say to yourself, well, Harry and Meghan didn't have anything to do with it. Well, yes, they did. They were behind funding those research reports that were used in various governments to make the case to put these laws into place. When we talk about the monarchy losing credibility, sure, they did, at least among younger generations when Meghan came out and accused them of racism. And then we look at the Great Reset narrative. They did gain some sort of traction in the elite circles. I mean, they literally are the poster children for everything woke. Remember when Harry and Meghan were pushing for vaccine equity for the World Health Organization? Well, what do you think they were doing? They were doing the bidding for these globalists in pharma because they see now putting out equity in vaccines to the rest of the world means more money and a whole industry that will open up, just like the climate scam. So who really was to benefit from this mess? Well, it definitely wasn't Meghan. And the way that I see it, she was actually just the vessel. The real benefactors here are those who were pushing for this centralized control in speech, control in everything that you do in your life, those that are testing the digital obedience systems using identity politics, and then also those selling the anti-royalism or the traditionalists in favor of selling globalism, which moves into this transhumanism. Meghan Markle is less the mastermind and more like the Trojan horse funded by elite networks trying to recalibrate Western narrative structures, starting with Britain's most symbolic institution. It's about as evil as it can get because it's fueled by greed as well as power-hungry assholes. In my next video, we're going to take a look at some of the grants and projects that have been in progress that could explain some of the behaviors that we have seen over the past 7 years, not only by Meghan and Harry, but also within the Megxit community. Yes, and I'm talking about those that have infiltrated into this community and are being paid to not only trigger emotion in certain people that they see as vulnerable, but also to divide this community. If you haven't noticed, there has been a bit of friction going on, and that is all intentional because people are being paid to do it. I'll be sharing more of this in the next video, so make sure that you are subscribed and you have your alert notification on because this is a video you're not going to want to miss. Definitely leave your thoughts below, and as always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!
Such a fraud.